comments while we wait for others to join in? Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to today's virtual tour of the Timken Museum. We're very excited to have you with us this morning. A few housekeeping things before we get started. Please keep yourselves muted throughout today's presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Zoom chat function by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen that says chat in order to type your questions, and we'd be happy to address any questions or comments. If you're joining us over Facebook Live, welcome to you as well. You can always ask any questions you may have using the comment section on Facebook, and we'll be monitoring those comments and answering those questions throughout the tour as well. Lastly, this tour is being recorded and streamed live, and we will be posting to our social media channels once this tour is over. If you would like to rewatch this tour or watch our other tours put on by the Timken, please check out our Facebook pages and you'll find them there. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning, Dr. Florence Gillman. Dr. Gillman has been a docent at the Timken since 2022, and she has been a member of USD's faculty since 1986. At USD, Dr. Gillman has served as chair of the Department of Theology and Religious Studies, coordinator of the program in Interdisciplinary Humanities, and coordinator of the program in the Classics. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'll turn things over to you, Dr. Gillman.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Renata. So hello to everyone, wherever you are, whether it's morning or afternoon or evening. I'm zooming into you right now from India. I'm in New Delhi, and I might add that occasionally the internet goes off for a couple of minutes. And if it happens, just hang on, and hopefully Renata will be able to tell you when we come back on. I don't know if you have to be readmitted or anything like that. But anyway, let's hope for the best. And yeah, let's talk about Moses. So actually, Moses, I think, as far as I have observed, is missing from the Timken. And I wish he was there because this figure is so extraordinarily important in the history, not only of Judaism, but also Christianity and later Islam. So I decided to work on the iconography of Moses for my own interest, and I thought other people might have some interest in this too, as Moses has been presented in a great deal of very interesting art. So as we go forward here, I will take time for questions now and then. So as Renata said, you can also put them in the chat. So yes, as I said, Moses is a significant figure in the Abrahamic religions, which, as you know, are chronologically dependent upon each other. So Judaism originates from Christianity, and then together they influence the formation of Islam. Moses is an extraordinary figure for all three monotheistic religions, maybe more so for Judaism and Christianity than for Islam. This incredible painting by Rembrandt is so characteristic of what people think about Moses. When they think about Moses, it's Moses and the Ten Commandments. Actually, I'm not going to talk a lot about this painting tonight because I'm going to tell you how there is so much data that I've had to divide up the material And yeah, but I'll get to that in a minute. So the interesting thing about Moses in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament from the Christian perspective is that his life is told from the beginning to the end. So this is a major biography within biblical material. Moses functioned as a reluctant leader of his people, and that has always been a very fascinating aspect. How did he get to be the great leader that he was, and how did he function in that role? So we mainly know him as the leader of the exodus of the Jewish people from Egypt into the Sinai Peninsula. We know him, of course, as the mediator of the Sinai Covenant. We know him, of course, as the receiver and deliverer of the Ten Commandments. And finally, we know him as the greatest of us. So he's considered the first and the greatest of all of us. Okay, what is the historical context of this? Let's start with that, and let's remind ourselves of some important points. So the Jews, mainly the descendants of the tribe of Jacob via his 12 sons, immigrated to Egypt in the 17th to the 16th century BCE. So in this period, roughly 1650 to 1550 BCE, Egypt had foreign pharaohs. And that's key to the story of Moses, in the sense that the foreign pharaohs, the Hyksos, were open to other foreigners moving into Egypt. And therefore, the Jews went to Egypt due to famine in ancient Palestine. They were welcomed by the Hyksos. By the way, when I use the word Palestine, please note that that is a geographical term. It is not equivalent to the use of the word Palestine or Palestinians today. Okay. So it doesn't have geographically, it does not have political connotations. It's a geographic region. So the descendants of Jacob had immigrated to Egypt and were relatively welcomed into the area of the Egyptian Delta, the northeastern area of the Delta. And we find this elaborately told in Genesis, stories of into Egypt, led especially by Joseph, and who had been rejected by his brothers, and they thought they had sold him into slavery in Egypt, and in fact he had been able to turn around and become a great success, and was able to welcome his brothers and all of the tribe and their father Jacob into Egypt, according to the narrative. Well, the Jews had flourished in Egypt and were probably very shocked when their fortune changed. And the reason that happened was that the Egyptian pharaohs were no longer Hyksos, but were, what do I want to say, actual Egyptians. So those people turned against foreigners, and the story, as Genesis tells it, is that the Jews then became enslaved. Now, this is all a storyline I'm telling you, okay? If I was doing the pure history of this period, we would have to talk about this probably all day to get all the factual material here in here and nuanced correctly. Okay, so I'm talking about the general storyline. Anyway, the Jews become enslaved under the Hyksos, or under the return of the Egyptian rulers. And the birth story of Moses then is set in that context. So when he is born into a period of anti-immigrant feeling, in a period in which the Egyptians are apparently so afraid of the immigrants in their midst that they are attempting to decrease the population of those immigrants by ordering midwives of the Jewish people to not allow male babies to flourish. So the idea would be that male babies should be suffocated. Female babies were acceptable because they would produce children. They would make wives for Egyptian men and would use their Jewish identity into the Egyptian families in which they would be married or taken in as slaves. So girl babies did not have to be put to death, but boy babies, again, according to the narrative, were undesirable. So it was up to the midwives to make sure that such children did not flourish. By the way, there's a really interesting story from about 800 years before the story of Moses, an Akkadian story about Sargon. So from the area of Assyria, which is today, this area would be pretty much northern Iraq. It has a similar story, actually, about Sargon, how he was born and floated in the river, waiting for someone to rescue him when his life had been previously threatened. Okay, let's look at things geographically too, because geography is determinative of history. That's a really important idea, and it's very obvious throughout biblical history. Okay, so this area right here, the southern Levant, so the coast of the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, as you can see, is relatively fertile, but it is subject to famine. And the knee-jerk reaction of people who lived in the southern part of it throughout the biblical stories is to go to Egypt. So they could travel right along the coast. There was a road called the Royal Road. There were Egyptian fortresses all the way along it. So people could travel quite easily into the Egyptian delta and get food. And that's the story of the Jews, of moving the tribe of Jacob, led by Joseph first, moves into the Nile Delta in the northeastern region. This is called generally, Bible here and there, it's called the land of Goshen. So that's where they went. That's how you should envision the immigration that the story talks about. So in between the geographical area of Palestine and the northeastern Nile Delta is, of course, the Sinai Peninsula. And a huge amount of the action of the life of Moses occurs in this triangular piece of land. As you can see, it is mountainous in the south, and it is quite flat, and throughout desert. People estimate that the population today, which is about, I believe, last time I checked, about 55,000. That's about the maximum it can support in terms of what is produced there. And most of those people need to live in the north where they can fish. So this place is barren generally in terms of population. Right now, things have changed a bit because since Egypt took over the Sinai from Israel, Egypt has built quite a bit of infrastructure, especially down in here, and created an amazing place called Sharm el-Sheikh, which is one of the greatest places to surf in the world. So, but that's another whole story. That's now in the time of the Jewish immigration to Egypt. The Sinai was a very, very barren desert and very, very difficult, especially if you're moving down here through the mountains, which is what under the in the time of Moses people ended up doing. Okay. The subject of Moses is so huge. The subject of the iconography of Moses, in other words, how he's been presented in art, is so huge that I decided I need to divide this. And so what I'm going to do in this current lecture is mainly his younger years, especially his infancy. So even though the picture I picked for the advertisement for this is Moses with the stone tablets of the Decalogue of the Ten Commandments, we won't get to that today. That will be a major part of the second part two, the second part of the life of Moses in iconography. So you might be wondering, oh, well, how much is there to say about his infancy? Well, actually, there's some very interesting art to look at because his infancy was fascinating to artists in different times. It was fascinating to artists in the very early Christian period, preceded by fascinating to Jews in the same period, especially in the period of Greco-Roman civilization. We'll look at that in a minute. It then became really fascinating to artists in the Renaissance, and also, as I will show you, in particular to one impressionist. The poignant story of Moses being threatened with death and placed in the Nile, where he could be rescued by an Egyptian princess, a story I know you know. I know I don't need to tell you the story. But the thing about it is, it has many poignant touchstones for the viewers today, and has for a long time. It is often a story portrayed in the type of children's hospitals known as foundling hospitals, which we don't specifically have such places, I don't think, at least in the United States today. But in the past, of course, we did have such places in many countries. Also, likewise, have the whole issue of unwanted children being abandoned or left at hospitals, left in police stations, left in restrooms, left at gas stations. The whole issue of children being abandoned has struck a chord with people thinking about this story, and some art even then has been used in institutions where especially there have been foundlings. I didn't know when I started to work on this that the week that I would give this talk would be also the week that Hamas would attack Israel. But even as we're talking here today, there are desperate people in Israel and in Gaza trying to figure out what to do with their babies and their little kids to give them a chance to survive. I ran across a story today about a family, I think it was on the Israeli side, a family who had a safe room, and they put the little boy in there locked in so that he could not be kidnapped. And then the parents themselves, in defending their house, were both killed. So those people, you could describe for them trying to save their little boy, give him a future, as they risked and lost their own lives. So the issue of foundlings is a very poignant issue. We can only imagine how many people are trying to live through the bombing in the Gaza Strip today and just keep their kids alive. Well, that's the ancient story, huh? That's the story of Moses. As the story goes, and we'll look at it a little bit with a few of the details here, because I know you know the story, okay? But it is a case story of a foundling. The basic characters are Moses' mother, Jochebed, his sister Miriam, Pharaoh's daughter, and midwives who are called Shiphrah and Puah. So the story went that there was an order to the midwives to smother any male babies and allow female babies to live, as we already said. And Jochebed and Moses' sister Miriam came up with a plot according to which they would hide Moses, or they would not exactly hide him, but they would put him in a watertight basket of some type, put him in the reeds, the thick reeds along the edge of the Nile, and put him near a spot that they knew Pharaoh's daughter and her ladies in waiting type characters would go to bathe. And they were pretty sure that somebody would take him to raise him as a slave. They knew that his future would be a servant, probably, of whoever took him. And that was their best idea of how to keep him alive and at least give him some kind of a possible future. So, so these are the characters anyway: his mother, his sister, Pharaoh's daughter, and the midwives. These people are Levites. They're of the tribe of Levi. They aren't yet in Egypt considered the priestly tribe. They will be later in the life of Moses, when Moses appoints his brother Aaron as the high priest, as the priest, who becomes the symbol then of all high priests. But they are Levites. Okay, this piece, I think you could talk about it for a long time. It's Moses and Jochebed, so that's his mother then. Moses, obviously, in the basket pair. Pedro Americo did this gorgeous painting, which is now in the National Museum of Fine Arts in Rio de Janeiro. Look closely at his mother. She looks like she is almost ready to dance. She is dressed very suggestively. Obviously, she is young and in her own way, very beautiful. You could read an awful lot into this painting. And I'm sure that that's what Americo intended. Perhaps he wanted her to speak to many women who have babies that they cannot support, that for some reason they cannot keep. Perhaps he wanted this painting to be a source of discussion about that terrible situation in society where some mothers, for whatever reasons, cannot keep their babies. By the way, this is the only picture I found so far of Jochebed and Moses. So this will be like an early moment, you might say, in the narrative, where she's trying to decide what to do. What are her options? The picture is incredibly poignant because we know that at any one time, think about it, in right now Gaza and Israel, along the southern border of the United States, in Ukraine, there are all kinds of people living this exact moment. What am I going to do to save this baby? I wanted to show you the oldest known image of Moses in the river, in the Nile, and tell you about this special place, just in case you haven't read about it, or probably not been there because it's in Syria. But the oldest known image we have of Moses in the Nile, as you can see on the slide, is mid-3rd century AD. It's a fresco. It's in the famous synagogue at Dura Europos. And this place, I'll show you on a map where it is and tell you something about it. This place is a gold mine. And as you can see from this picture, it's kind of a long, it's almost like the old kind of film strip where you roll it further and further to the left and you get farther to the story. So over here is Moses's mother and Moses and Miriam, his sister. And then you come here where the baby has been placed in the Nile, and Pharaoh's daughter right here has found the baby in the reeds, and you see the reeds down here, the papyrus reeds along. So that's the next moment of the story. And here you see the 3 helpers or 3 ladies in waiting type of Pharaoh's daughter. Then you notice that you can tell by the clothing, okay, that Miriam is over here and she's pointing to something, and we don't have the rest of the picture here. Well, we know the rest of the story. We know that she then tells the Pharaoh's daughter, well, I know a woman who can breastfeed the baby, and the princess, Pharaoh's daughter, isn't stupid. She probably figured this out. She probably realizes it's the baby's real mother. But she also realizes that for some reason, having this baby probably is eventually a slave, or maybe to play with her other children. Who knows what she was thinking? Yeah, she goes along with it and says, okay, I will pay this wet nurse and then to raise this child for me. But why don't we see the rest of the story here? I'm not actually sure, but I'll show you the other evidence that we have of what was in this painting. This is the oldest known image that we have then in a synagogue, and I'll try to explain to you the situation. So we're talking about a place, this is a map of Syria, and we're talking about a place right here. You see my pointer? It's called Abu Kamal. And more common name we use for it is Dura Europos. Dura meaning fort, Fort Europos. So you see that this is, of course, the huge Euphrates River running through Syria and into Iraq. And right here on the border, which has been the border for millennia, was this fort, Dura Europos. And that's where this synagogue was located, in which we find that picture, that oldest known picture of Moses in the Nile as a fresco. Now, this might just look like a crumbling wall. It is crumbling, but this is the large hall of the synagogue. And the thing about this is what we see back here, okay, was covered with frescoes. And those have been carefully removed. I'll show you how they did it, how they removed such frescoes. It's an absolute gold mine of art in this synagogue. And this is all part of kind of like one big long main street along the walls of the fort. And on that main street, there was also a Christian church, and there was also a place to worship the Syrian god Mithras. So it's like a street of competing religions, and these places survived because the Romans were coming from behind this wall. Okay, the Romans were coming from the west, and the fort, the people holding the fort in the mid-200s knew this. And to fortify this wall, they literally filled all the buildings along here with dirt and rocks. And so that's what preserved the art of the synagogue and of the church and the inside of Mithraeum. So that's how we got this art. And the excavation of this was especially done by scholars, archaeologists from Yale. So Yale's Museum of Art has this fresco. It has a lot of the material from here, but it actually never brought the fresco all the way to Yale. It went into the National Museum of Damascus. So let me just show you another way to look at this, because if you have been following some of my lectures, and I know some of you have repeatedly, I keep coming back to this place because there's so much, there's just a wealth of material here from both the synagogue and the church. Okay, the synagogue is L7 right here. So this reddish, orangish building you can see right here. So that's a pretty large building on that street. And the Christian church is M8. That's right down here. So we have extraordinary art from that also. Okay, so the the Romans were in control of this fortress in the mid 250s, and the Persians were coming. They knew they were coming, and they knew they were going to attack from the west. And so that is why this whole area got literally buried to strengthen this wall. When it was uncovered in the 1930s, this is what it looks like. And you can see one of the famous archaeologists who worked here, Susan Hopkins. Okay, she's trying to clean off these mosaics, or some of it was mosaic, some of it was fresco. She's trying to clean it off before it was actually removed. And so this was apparently the initial cleaning. And this is a photographer from a photograph from the archives. It still, as you can see, doesn't show the whole story. What it does show is Miriam pointing this way, probably saying, "This is where I can get a woman to take care of the baby for you." So now look at this. There was an artist working on the excavation named Herbert Goethe. And he was there to sketch everything as it was uncovered. And he would add the color. But what we do see here is what the whole thing really looked like. And so here's where the last paintings left off, right here. Okay, but now you can see that Miriam is here, and it looks like again probably her mother, and it has moved in the story to when they turn over Moses when Moses has been raised by the princess and then becomes a companion for the children of the Pharaoh and becomes known to the Pharaoh. So you can see the story has progressed. It's sort of like unfolding old-time film strip, something like that. Okay, they brought this. They brought the fresco, took it off the wall, and this is what it's like. To remove a fresco, also some of the art was mosaics. So as you can see, they cut a very thin layer, but not too thin, of the wall. Painting would be right here where the arrow is on this side over here. And then that goes into a museum. So the Moses picture is in the National Museum of Damascus, and many other pictures, frescoes, mosaics, and so on are in the Yale Art Gallery. Okay, what else can be said about this? Well, tragically, going back to this picture right here, what has happened more recently is really tragic in terms of the history of archaeology and the history of art, and the history of all we can learn from this place, and that is that early in the 2000s, ISIS basically destroyed this excavation. They went row by row, like almost as if it was a farm field, and dug holes about 2 to 3 feet deep, looking for artifacts. And the idea was to put those on the antiquities market to support the fighting from the perspective of ISIS. So they really have ruined this archaeological site, as they have with various others also. So we are very lucky that what has been studied and kept, survives. Okay, that's the earliest we have, earliest known image of Moses in the Nile. Now I want to move to the Renaissance, because the Renaissance really liked this story. The Renaissance used it in many ways as a foundling story. They also used it as a parallel with Jesus, who was threatened at birth by Herod, according to Matthew's Gospel. So the Renaissance gets very interested in this story, and there's some interesting paintings to look at. Because it was a bathing scene, the tendency in the Renaissance was to paint Pharaoh's daughter as beautifully clothed to demonstrate the artist's technique with painting beautiful, so on. On the other hand, it also gave artists permission to paint nudes if they wished. And so, you're painting a biblical story and you're painting nude women. Well, that's what the story seems to suggest. So it was almost like a license for artists if they wanted to paint nudes. And you will see in some of these, you will see both the emphasis on the elegant dress and you'll see the emphasis on nudity. Interestingly, no male needs to be in the scene. There are a couple of paintings, I didn't include them this time. There are a couple of paintings with a man, but for the most part, the paintings of Moses in the Nile are all women. Okay, the Nile surroundings became more interesting in the Renaissance too, and as you can imagine, many artists took the liberty to change the ambiance to European situations, such as this one right here, where you see up on a hill here what look like the ruins of possibly some type of Roman building. Okay, this is a Dutch Renaissance artist, Ten Broek, and as you can see, he has taken the liberty to paint a great deal of, to include a great deal of nudity. He wants you to know it's Egypt, though, because he's got a Sphinx right here. So I want you to know it's Egypt, in spite of how the greenery looks, which along the Nile doesn't look anything like this. It's very hard to see Moses. He's right in here. You can see his head. Actually, I think this is his head right here. But you could say, doesn't seem like Moses is the central figure in this painting. So, yeah, it looks like Ten Broek was one of those Renaissance painters who especially wanted, accepted the license as he experienced it to paint more nudes in his pictures. Now, this one is interesting because Orazio Gentileschi, the father of Artemisia, who in the long run, or at least now, is more famous than her father. Orazio painted this finding of Moses in the early 1630s, and it was once in the Queen's house in Greenwich. He painted it for an English family originally, apparently, and he, you notice, he isn't so interested in nudity. All the pointing is what stands out in this painting. So point, 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 point. Huge amount of pointing, hands all over the place in this painting. And the painting leaves you to puzzle out, well, who is Miriam, Moses' sister? Which one is she? And yeah, I think right here, because this woman is maybe poorly dressed, this one too, though, I think possibly Miriam is one or the other of these. Or maybe is it this one who looks like she has a message for them? We don't really know. Now look okay, so this is early 1630s. Now look at this one. That's the same exact picture. Well, not exact, I shouldn't use the word exact. It's the same picture with a great deal of modifications that he painted only a couple years later, which is now in the Prado. Here, he really worked on the dresses. The dresses are much fancier. The pointing is gone, at least on the right side of the painting. You see it here, here, and a little bit here. In order to see the contrast, I put them on the same page. So you can see, and this is just within a couple of years, you can see how he went from the early one to the one he did just a couple of years later. Among the huge changes are the change in this figure right here. Look at the amount of material in her dress over here, and so on. Now, if we knew a lot of details about these, you might also know that someone in these pictures is a benefactor, benefactress, possibly. That could be researched. Okay, moving on into the 17th century, we have Da Cortona's discovery of Moses and the bulrushes. And we find that unusual term bulrushes, and we don't see them really. There is a difference between the papyrus that grows along the Nile and bulrushes, but it's not that different that we need to say you can't call Moses the situation being in the bulrushes. But it does seem to be a more English term that came into the names of many of the paintings and of the story, Moses and the bulrushes. This is the best digitized photo I could find. I'm not sure if even more digitization would make this a clearer, sharper picture. It could also be that it has been damaged. But anyway, this is in the Royal Albert in Exeter. Okay, there's more to talk about, but we need to stop a minute and see if there's any questions. So please raise your hand or put a question in the chat box. No questions? That's fine. Okay. And I need to just check the time here. Okay, so moving on further into the Renaissance. There's another Dutch painting in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Again, with the artist having taken the license to paint a great deal of, to include a great deal of nudity. This picture too is puzzling in the sense of which one is Miriam? And I don't think we can answer that. Okay, I have to go a little faster, I think. Next, I wanted to talk about a very old mosaic related to Moses. And this is in the famous Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome. And it's on one side of the nave. When I show you the picture, you will see it shows Jochebed giving Moses to Pharaoh's daughter. And there is also a section of the mosaic, a second section of it, showing the boy Moses being taught the wisdom of the Egyptians, as the book of Acts says. So we see Moses in a circle of wise men. And yeah, the location is on the left side. Well, let's just look at the church first. Okay, so Santa Maria Maggiore is a major basilica. It is absolutely extraordinary in many ways, especially in terms of the art. So as you can see, it is mosaic type of art, and all along the side here, both sides are mosaics. Now, these date to the 500s, some to the 400s. So we're back with a very early presentation of Moses. So Moses is on the left side, on the second one back. I think that based on those directions, it's right here. And what does it look like? It looks like this. It's a two-part mosaic. Okay. So here is Moses being in the company of the Pharaoh's daughter and her maids and so on. And here he is, perhaps about the same age, debating or learning from the Egyptian scholars around him. So it's the young Moses. And why was that picked for Santa Maria Maggiore? Well, obviously because it rings a lot of bells with Jesus talking with the Pharisees according to Luke's gospel and pressing the Pharisees with his knowledge. So this is a very ancient manuscript. Okay, the last artist I'm going to talk about is James Tissot. He's an impressionist, was an impressionist, and he, for many years, he painted the very fashionable society of London and Paris. But in 1885, he had a profound religious experience in a church, and I don't know what kind of church, and I don't think he ever really wrote what he felt happened. But it made him begin a series of religious paintings called The Life of Christ. And these paintings were put on tour. There were approximately 400, I think, not exactly 400, but approximately 400 toured some of the great art galleries in Paris, London, and in the United States. And the Brooklyn Museum bought that series in 1900. Meanwhile, there was so much acclaim for what he had done. And the reason what he had done the reason that caused appreciation of what he had done is that he had gone to what was then Palestine. He had gone repeatedly trying to get a feel for the land and the greenery, the stones, the mountains, the types of buildings, colors, tried to get a feel for the situation to make his paintings more realistic. So he was trying to be more historically accurate within his impressionism. because the first series, The Life of Christ, was so successful, or so meaningful to so many people, he decided to make a whole series on the Hebrew Bible. So he did 386 illustrations of the Hebrew Bible. And those those are very, very powerful, much beloved images. They are now in the collection of the Jewish Museum in New York. You can see high resolution images of them on the museum's website, and you can download them. So the ones I'm going to show you are from that collection. I put here that eventually, it was a very long story, they ended up there. For a long time, no one had the money to pay approximately $1 million for the whole collection. But eventually, eventually that's where they wound up, and they are much appreciated. So this is a type of combined impressionism, I would say realism in some ways, that he tried to communicate to people. And people, many people have appreciated his attempt at historicity, you could say. So this is Pharaoh, who, according to the book of Exodus, at one point calls in the two major midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, and he questions them. And he says that they have not been putting to death male babies. And why have they allowed some male babies to survive? And there's a great response from the two women. Well, the Jewish women are so strong. That is, they're slaves. Jewish women are so strong that they give birth very quickly, and by the time we get there, we can't find the boys. In other words, they're already spirited away or hidden. So he did this one. Then he does this one of Pharaoh's daughter having Moses brought to her. So here you can see the very impressionistic approach to the reeds, the papyrus along the Nile. And the blue green of it is really beautiful in this painting. It's not clear if Miriam is in this painting. If one of these girls, maybe this one, is intended to be Miriam, we don't know. And I don't think he wrote any notes that would help us. This is the last one, which you can see is similar to the previous one, where his title is that the mother of Moses, is Pharaoh's daughter, is receiving Moses from the mother of Moses. She supposedly doesn't know that one of these women here then is his mother. Presumably the other one then is Miriam. Well, I think I am pretty much out of time, and just want to point to the future and note that there are huge moments in Moses's life besides the finding of Moses in the Nile that are also very interesting to look at. For example, Moses drawing water from a rock, which you see in this Tintoretto here on the left. And of course, the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, which raises the whole question of laws written in stone, which is a whole interesting biblical and archaeological subject that I would like to talk about also. So this is kind of a future hint of what part 2 will be like. I noticed someone asked me when will that be. It's not yet scheduled, but I assume it will be sometime in the new year. So you can watch the Timken website, and I'm sure it'll be announced on there. Okay, I'll stop there. Does anybody want to jump in with some questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise hands. So if I may.
Yes, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's have a question, just an observation, because I was digging deep into those two Gentileschi paintings. So they were both painted in England, but for different commissioners. The Charles I got what he wanted. The Philip IV though had a more strict fashion at his court. So everything that was too exposed was immediately covered. But the general structure is the same, of course. It was easier for him. Gentileschi was old. He was about 70. And I think Artemisia was there as well, because they were just finishing the ceilings of the Marlborough Palace. I'm not sure. Okay, and the girl, the one who stands on her knees, is Miriam.
Let's go back to that. So yeah, based on what I have read in my notes, Artemisia was there and may have worked on some of it. And
I'm not sure she worked on that one. This is not what I'm saying. I don't know. I know that they worked on a project of Marlborough ceilings.
They were working together, but also he died right after the second one.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It was intended as a gift, and the fact that Miriam is standing on her knees is in a pure compliance with the line of thought of authorities. She was not supposed to stand.
So which, based on your knowledge, which one is Miriam?
The one in the green one.
This one right here?
Yep. Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for adding that in here. Great. Are there other questions? I see more in the chat.
In the chat, Ryan was suggesting or requesting future topics such as representation of Mary Magdalene and the same on the Virgin Mary. Just a few suggestions, if anything.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, there would be both. Would be interesting to work on. Both would be voluminous.
Yes, it would be a lot of work, but very interesting. And there are no questions from Facebook, so
okay.
That will...
Well, thank you all for tuning in, and I'll sign out. Oh, I got one more. There's one more question coming in. Okay. So thank you all for tuning in, and especially thank you, Lilia, for your additional comments.
Oh, I forgot something small regarding why Oratio usually didn't want to make his public work for understanding. So he always did it easy to make a stress on it. So the main figure is the queen, is the pharaoh's daughter. And she was standing for Henriette. Henriette was just delivering her male baby. And that's why all the limelight is, and the dress, of course, is on
the gold
queen.
dress. The gold dress, yes. Okay, thank you again, and thank you to everybody. So good night from New Delhi. I'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Florence, for such a fascinating presentation. And before you go, I would like to remind you that this tour and other tours that were put on previously by the Timken can be found on our social media channels like Facebook. And if you would like to find further information on any future tours being put on by the Timken Museum, please check out our website event calendar. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.
Good night. Thank you.